I was just praying how often we are only conscious of surface disturbances because we live so on the surface of life. We don't penetrate down into the depth. Out of the heart, that means the lower levels of your being, the lower levels of your thinking, the lower levels of your whole spiritual setup. There are the issues of life. But they come poking their way up. Sometimes they are released and it takes days, weeks, and even months, and with some even years before it reaches the surface where it is made manifest. And so I often say, Lord, I am hungry and I am in need, but perhaps I'm only concerned with a surface disturbance which is annoying me now. Perhaps that has its origin down on the, I call the ocean floor of my being. You see, we're like a trinity, down on the ocean floor. And so sometimes he has to go down there to reveal to us the real reason for this disturbance up here, or even the heart hunger. Now, sometimes when we analyze what we call the heart hunger, we will be quite amazed. It isn't just a desire, I want more of God. That's all right. That's all right. We won't talk about that. But that isn't it. The whole being, we are a trinity in our structural law of our being. And as our old church fathers said so pointedly, the heart was made for God. Neither shall it find rest until it rests in Him. Now, he was not just talking about my soul finding salvation. He was not talking about that. That's included. But I am more than a soul. The soul content in me is only one aspect of my being. The whole being is to be brought under the powers of redemption. Spirit, soul, and even body. Now, God takes regard to the body. Never become so spiritual that you lose consciousness of body. No, even in the resurrection, God's going to yet tamper with this old body, sure as you live. But why not? Because it's the completion of the redemption of the whole concept of my life and your life. Spirit, soul, body. Well, now sometimes this urge to live, I'd like to read you a poem God gave me on the eternal urge. It's rather heavy, I don't know, but sometime I might dare to do it. The eternal urge, this terrific urge that is birthed within every one of us. It does seek expression. Life seeks it. It's the first law of life is to become explosive, to live. Well, now, since that is true, that urge to live relates to three departments of your being and to my being. It actually does. To make the personality a complete concept. It has to be. If I disregard or become ignorant of any part of it, how many see my salvation is limited? The response is only partial. And God is only partially glorified in the release and in the redemption of the whole being. Spirit, soul, body. He's concerned with your spiritual life. He's concerned with your soulish life, your psychic, soulish life. He's concerned. It's a part of you. It's a part of you. Don't be shying off from it and think you are just a spirit. No, this great field of what we are. Sometime when I am freed in the millennium, I'm going to lecture and talk on some things which are very wonderful to me. I'd like to give you a real analysis of what we are as God created us. I would like to do it. Not purely from the sense of a scholar in psychology, not that. I know that field. I've had my courses in it. Courses in experimental psychology. I know that, but that is not it. It has a certain background and a certain fundament. But there's no one in the world but this mystical Spirit of God that can get in there and do it. And He is so wonderful in the delicacy of His being. He can get in there. Now, sometimes the urge may rest in one department, the need, perhaps in another. As we found out, we know from just ordinary 1, 2, 3 psychology that most all of the ailments that react in your flesh and body are mental and spiritual. They are. Jesus knew it too, and he dealt with it. He dealt with it. He's the most gifted psychologist and psychiatrist that has ever lived. Ever lived. And any of you who have allowed him to give you a treatment, you have found it out. But don't ask him unless you mean it. I warn you, don't ask it unless you mean it. He may take you at your word. I've heard people say, "Oh, Lord, show me my heart. Oh, just as it is." I said, "Don't pray that. You'll drop dead." Well, it's true. I'm not laughing. I say that with all seriousness because we are not able to receive even a glimpse of it. In one of the chapters in my book, I hope that my books will come before the meetings are over, you'll find a chapter there, "Deep calleth unto deep." I want you to read that. I want you to read it quietly with the Lord. Not because it's a bit of truth, but read it quietly with the Lord. Deep calleth unto deep. The two great, profound depths which are discovered. The deep and the chaotic ruin of the human race. That's one of the most profound depths that people would ever want to dig into. What is the other deep? The deep in the heart of God. That deep yearn in the heart of God. That deep pushing of the heart of God down like this to broken humanity. And one deep calls to the other deep. Continue. God is calling. Broken humanity is calling in 10,000 voices, 10,000 million voices. All creation is calling. This lovely country, clouded with judgment, how many know it's still calling? Why? For its redemption. Redemption is just saving thy soul and taking it out and putting it in a place they call heaven with golden streets and hand me a heart. Well, I say thank you, but put the heart down. Where's the Lord? Well, that's the way it will be with me. I don't think a heart will ever intrigue me. If you are frustrated here and you've never had certain longings and urges and desires satisfied here, don't make heaven a projection of those frustrated things liberated in a glorified state. How many get that kind of a heaven, or don't you? Do you get it or don't you? I got shoes, you got shoes, all God's children got shoes. How did he write that? What in the world made a slave write that? When I get to heaven, I'll put on my shoes and I'll walk all over God's gift. Well, now, what provoked that? Do you know? The slave was conscious of a terrible lack that he saw provided for in his master and the household and all the other people. So he comforted himself because that was denied. That was not forthcoming. There was a frustration here. So what does he say? Well, heaven to me will be what? Lifting this thing up into a new realm where it can be satisfied on the golden street, on the golden slippers. How many get it or don't you get it? Just about half of the heavens that I ever deal with people are just about on that level. They are. Now, don't say you don't have heaven. I want you to all hear it so I don't get out with that. I misquoted all over the continent, and I know it. Because people don't know what I'm driving at. Now it'll go out, don't you believe in a heaven? Now listen, everybody. I, John Wright Follette, I do believe in a heaven. How many of you got it? Now don't say you don't, or you'll lie. I get very tried in my spirit because of these things. People don't know who I am. They don't know what I'm doing. The preachers, even in Pentecost, don't know yet who I am or what on earth I'm driving at. And I've been trying to get this thing in for 25, 30, 40, and even 50 years, and they don't know it yet. And if I dare to let out a bit of real Christian philosophy, real Christian teaching, well, that is the orthodox. I wish you could take my place just for a little while, dear. I just certainly do. I just wish you could. Do you wonder why I hibernate in the woods back up in New York and they dig me out once in a while? Well, you get in my shoes and you know just exactly why. You know just exactly why. There was a disturbance. So heaven will be to many people the perfect satisfaction of all the things which we're not able to attain, acquire, possess, or experience here. Heaven will be to the majority of people a release up here where it can be. How many of you get that or don't you? How many know half the hymns are written on that beast? Well, now, I believe in heaven and harps and golden streets and all this business. That's all right. But it never intrigues me at all. 10,000 golden harps, and I could play on 7 at once, and one of them with 1,000 strings, as somebody said. Do you know that it seems so strange to me? Where is the wonderful Lord in all that? Where is there a deeper understanding of His heart? Where is there a deeper communion? Where is the relief? Where will there be at least a release for that adoration and the glory which is becoming our God? If I could only stand before His high and holy altar, to lift my hands in the adoration and the praise. Not even praise, I thank you for. No. No, it's the adoration that bursts with the Spirit of God, who once more wants to possess instruments through whom that might vibrate back again to the throne of God. That adoration. I think we'll have a beautiful heaven. Don't worry. It's going to be very beautiful. But I want to find there something that God has been seeking all through time. He seeketh them to worship Him in spirit and reality. That's your word. That's real. But then it's all right if you want a heaven. Is it limited to that? Why, that's good. I'm not quarreling about it. But that isn't the point. He wants the whole trinity of the being satisfied, redeemed, brought back again, that even the body in which we live shall partake of His power. That strange, wonderful power that can transform us. And we shall have a glorified body in which to live and move. Well, I'll come back to this idea of the hunger or the thirst or the source. That's a potential thing. It belongs to us. It's a part of our setup. It's a part of the creation. Now, God is the answer. He doesn't mean that He is just the answer by having salvation so that my desire for salvation is answered in Him. That's true. But He means the whole being is to find its perfect and adequate adjustment and satisfaction in Him. I believe that with all my heart. I believe it reacts in the body. Sometimes I feel just nothing but life like I can go that way, get out of it. I don't think that's fanatical. Here I'm 75 in a couple of weeks or so, and I feel as if I were 40. I feel as if I were 40. These are all my own teeth. I can eat and sleep and carry on and do. Why shouldn't I? Well, he lives in me, dear. I don't feel like an old man trembling around. I'm not that. That isn't who I am. I'm a vibrant, living spirit that's alive forevermore. It shall never die. I'll never die. No, you won't either if you only knew it. No. Well, now come back. This urge, this desire, don't let it become too local in any one certain field. But remember, your whole being is crying out to God. Your whole being is crying out to God for its redemption. And so we will have our heaven, of course. We're going to have a beautiful heaven. I remember speaking not just along this line one time, but I said to heaven for some of us, it would not be just merely a satisfaction of a frustration here and a desire which has not been satisfied and an urge that never found its release here, but heaven will be lifting up there and finding it. And somebody heard me talking like that, and the dear woman, she says, "Oh, there goes my heaven," as if I had knocked the heaven out of her living. Said right out loud, she put up there, "Oh, there goes my heaven." I don't want to take anyone's heaven away this morning, dear. I want you to have the sweetest heaven you can have. Isn't that generous? I really mean it. I'm not taking anyone's heaven away. I'm only letting you sense some of the things that God has and His hopes that we too may have it, to hold it. Now we're going to get at these questions we'll never in the world get through. We had two yesterday. The one, can you remember them? You see, I'm an old school teacher. I'm a graduate teacher, and I used to teach, you see, before God ever got a hold of me. It's in my blood. How many of you can remember some of the points of this? How many of you remember that first one? Where am I? Your position. Let's get that. How many see it? That's your position. A fallen, broken down creature in need of help. Unmasked, all the leaves of our artificial coverings are stripped away. All the masks are taken off. And there we are. And He says, "Here I am." Well, now do you remember the other one? That's going on a little bit after you have come on past that first phase of your living. This is a picture of your experience in God. These are all little pictures of what happens to us as we move into God. This Bible isn't just stories. It's one of the most profound and marvelous, amazing revelation of truth that you could ever have. It's all hidden away there in picturesque, dramatic form, but don't become involved with that. Now, afterwards, he said, we found another question. What was it? Can you, before God, answer the question when He says, "What is your name?" Now, I said yesterday, a name spells your character. Your name. The name always indicated the character of the person. It was given because the person carried certain characteristic marks, which were all summed up by a word which would cover it. Jacob. What is that? Jacob means a deceiver, a crooked one, a liar, a deceptive, subtle one. And so, this man, Jacob, could not get through to God, nor can God even get through to him until he could make that confession. Just one word. What is your name? What are you? Now, don't bring out your camouflages. Don't do that. That's an old trick. No. Jacob. Fine, says that's all. Then you remember how the question provoked an answer. The answer became a confession of a platform upon which the blessing would always fall. Now, that's a principle. I found it. Nobody told me about that, but God showed it to me. And I have traced it all the way through my experience. How many know, even from salvation to the end, that will be the process? What are you? A sinner. All right. My confession of being a sinner does what? Makes it platform for God to come down with his salvation, but he can't come until we say it. You take that all the way through. It's a little principle that's found in there. In some forms, it's rather dramatic and alive, and other times the law of it is still there, if you want to analyze and go into it. Now we'll get those two bits of your setup straightened out. Now I want to talk about two other questions which are asked, and both of them are asked when the Lord knows exactly all about it, and yet he goes and asks it. And as we found yesterday, there is a reason why he should do that. Not for his benefit. It isn't to satisfy his ignorance, but it's to do a miracle in every one of us. Now, this next question has to do with provision. We've had position, condition. Now our third is our provision. And in John, you want the story, 6 and 5, we will find it. I'll read it to you, so if you don't want to fuss around with the Bible, I'll read it. I read the same kind of Bible you do. Well, some people don't believe it, so sometimes when I say it's in such a text, they all grab to see if I'm lying or not. I don't know what else it could be. And so I often am disturbed with them doing it, because I have a one-track mind. I believe I have some mind left. Sometimes I wonder if I have. But it's one track sort of a thing. This popular idea of the gifted person. I've known him to sit down at the breakfast table, and he'll be eating breakfast, reading the newspaper, listening to the blare of all the latest news on the radio right over here. His wife is talking to her dearie about the things of the day, and he's trying to solve a problem before he gets to office. How many see him doing 5 things all at once? Now, he's what I call highly gifted. When I want to sit down to listen to music or anything, I don't want somebody chattering at me all the time. Now, I go into homes. I hope I won't hurt anyone's feelings here. If you do this naughty, bad thing, don't do it anymore. The minute someone comes in and you feel like you want to visit with them, then that thing begins, an everlasting, tormenting thing, and nobody on earth listening to it. How many of you ever got caught in a mess like that? Come on. Now, don't you ever do that again. That's a horrible thing to do. Is your conversation worth listening to? If it is, then talk. If it isn't, then put something on that can talk. Don't do those things. They're horrible. They're horrible. You say, well, I'm getting my message, but I want to give you something practical so you don't think I'm too ethereal. I'm very practical. No, the minute you get in, put a television so that this thing is going in front of you, and they're talking to you, and you're saying, good afternoon, dear. Don't do things like that. When I hear fine music, I don't want somebody chattering at me. I don't want to be looking at things. I want to get the music. I want the spirit of it. I want the texture. How many know there's great texture in it? And it's subtle, and it's lost. And what'd you do today? And here's this artist just pouring out his soul, and you're talking about being. You know? Do you get it or don't you get it? Please don't do things like that. If you don't know enough and you're dumb about it, somebody else may not be as stupid. So I'll tell you for the sake of appearing as if you know something, if you don't, see? My grandmother used to say, keep still and people think you're intelligent anyway, don't say anything. Isn't that good advice? Yes. Well, here's this little story. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he said unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread, that these may eat? How many got your question already? Whence shall we buy bread? And he's so good to tell us this on the side. And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Isn't that exactly what I've been telling you for the last 2 questions? Exactly what I told you. He knows. This he did for his sake, not for Jesus. This he did to prove him, knowing himself what he would do. Then why not let him do it? No, you can't. You've got to fuss around. Getting hold of God and praying and tearing up the... Don't get into that confusion. By the Spirit, penetrate in past that and come into the possession. He has that. But he's going to ask this question, and now listen to his answer. Listen to his answer. It's so very typical. We're going to discover another little principle that's going to run from Genesis to Revelation, right in this little story, a principle. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. Do you see something or don't? How do you see he's reverting now to his natural, limited resources right away in the presence of the whole loaf of the bread of heaven is talking to him? Isn't it? Isn't he the great loaf of life? Isn't he the loaf of the bread of heaven? Certainly. And here is the loaf of heaven. All supply for eternity is saying, now what will you do? He can't see eternity. He can't see the eternal supply. He can't see even Jesus in his miracle power. He is too yet centered. How do you get him centered? In what? His own little interpretation of the problem with his limitations. Do you get it or don't? How many see him in a little puddle of just about as big as this? And what is he doing? Well, he's counting. He's counting. So instead of saying to the Lord, oh, Jesus, we have seen you work before. This is quite impossible to us. Will you be the host? And see, wouldn't it be nice if he could have done that? Billy can't do that. He's not advanced enough yet to do that. He has to twiddle around with his flesh, with his natural processes, with his counting. And so he says, well, a can full of bread, 2 pence worth of bread, is not sufficient. And the Lord smiling says, certainly it's not. We all know that, Philip. We all know that. But then he's going to help himself out of this difficulty of his limitation. How? One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, says unto him, there's a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. Now again, fall down, yeah. But what are they among so many? How many see them always falling down on the limitation point? Or don't you get that? Both of them, right away. Answers to both of them fall right down. But what is 2 pennies worth? What are, even if you have fish and bread, what is that to this multitude? Do you get it or don't? They are too self-conscious of their limitation. And they become that way because of their rationalizing. Now let us count it. I wish I dared to open up the types in here, the figures of it. How many notice there are 7 items? 5 loaves and what? 2 fish. 5 and 2 make what? 7. All right. I don't want to get in there, but it's good eating. That's really good. And 7 is your completion. It has to be 5 and 2. It can't be 4 and 3. It has to be 5 and 2. So I won't go in there, but that has to be that way. It has to be that way. The story won't reveal the truth that's underneath here. It won't be spirit and life vibrating coming up if you had 4 and 3. Well, don't 4 and 3 make 7? Mm-hmm. Sure it does. But it doesn't here. 5 and 2 will make 7. And so he says, we have this supply. So they begin to count. How many times you and I have had to do that? I don't do it anymore. The Lord trashed me out of that sometimes. That. I tell you, the benefit of my trashing. He just beats me out. And then after I get out, I say, oh, thank you, my dear Lord. Does anyone want to know this? He said, yes. I have a few people who would like to hear it. Now you go out and peddle it. So I go out, and sometimes out of 150 to 200 people, I get 5 people That's good. It bothered me first. I said, well, dear Lord, I've ministered all of this great group, and all I'm conscious of, and they have touched my spirit. And after I know they have touched me in spirit. They have come physically and spoken. I said, I got 5 out of 100. He says, don't be disturbed. Of all the thousands, I had 12, and one of them was a failure. Do you see the ratio? How many get your ratio? So I said, all right, Lord, if all I got is 4 people out of this camp meeting, I will be happy. The ratio is very tight because your price is very tight. So it says 5, 2, well, when you count, don't fall back upon counting forevermore your limitations. Now I have this, and this, and this, and this. Now that, this, and this. But I can't make it come out to feed a multitude. You never will. You know why? You have counted your limitations 5,000 times and never counted in the loaf of bread which was standing right by your side. You get it? You get it? He's not so concerned about their limitations. He's concerned with the fact they would recognize him. He is the great loaf. Now, the next time you're tempted to count your limitations, count them in his presence, and then look up. Just so happy to say, thank you, Lord. I'm counting you in on this. How many know you'll get somewhere? Yes, you will. Yes, you will. Now, don't be afraid to do this. But if you take comfort, a subtle psychic comfort, in falling back upon the limitation, because it brings a certain reaction psychically, and I know that. Now, don't do that. There's sort of a little sense of justification in feeling poor and poverty-stricken. You know, yes. How many know some people are only happy when they strike a note like that so that self-pity can come in? Sorry, things like that. You know that'll damn you quicker than plug tobacco. Sure will. The next time you count him in. He is below. All right. I like it the way that it's given over here in the message, the story when it's given here. It adds some little touches that I like very much. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him saying, this is a desert place, and the time is now past, and the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, they need not depart. Give ye them to eat, not let me feed them. Oh, you want to get by saying let him feed? No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that at all. He said, you give them to eat. He didn't say, now, I'll feed them, don't worry. No, he didn't say that, because he couldn't. He's telling us something. He says, give ye them to eat. Why is it that instantly the need is revealed? The disciple always has an escape, some way of getting rid of it, by projecting it off here, there, and yonder. He says, send these hungry groups, send them to the villages that they may buy bread. No, you can't do that. What are the villages? How many of you know what the villages are? Do you know what the villages are? That often you have sent the hunger of your heart and that urge within you have sent it to strange places for its satisfaction. Those are the villages where you think you might find the sequel, the answer, the supply for the thing that's here. The hunger is in you, and you have to do the giving. But he has a nice arrangement for it, a very sweet, beautiful arrangement. But stop sending them to the villages. This village business is always an escape mechanism for people. On the way to Emmaus, why were those discouraged disciples so happy to leave Jerusalem and makes their way to Emmaus, because Emmaus is an escape mechanism, so they don't have to live in the atmosphere of Jerusalem where they feel they have met defeat and failure. Do you get it or don't you? Yes. Jerusalem is where they have had all of that glorious idea of a kingdom that exploded. And the Messiah that they are following dies and leaves them. Well, who would want to deal with a more depleted wreck than that? A little handful of disciples completely reduced. All hope, which was on a natural basis, swept out from under them. And all the things that they desired wrecked. And then Jesus goes away up in heaven and leaves them. How many of you think that was a nice position? He may do it to you sometime. Don't be scared. He may dare to do it. He does to some souls. He dares to, but not too many. Anybody can take a blessing and stand it, but few can take a defeat and live, because you don't know how. Your reactions are not right. Your reactions are too terrifying, and you fall down under it. That's why God doesn't always trust some souls with great suffering and great trial and great discipline. He can, because they're not tempered to it. He can trust the multitude with a blessing. Well, who couldn't take a blessing? But so few that he can say, will you watch with me an hour? He tried it with 3 of his disciples, that very thing. Can I trust you 3 to watch with me an hour? I'm going through one of the most terrifying experiences in my whole living. He couldn't trust that little bunch of people. He couldn't take his disciples into it. He couldn't. He had 3 whom he felt were fairly well tempered. He says, will you watch with me this hour? Oh, I'll go where you want me to go. Oh, put your hand down. I get too tired of that stuff in our meetings. I really do. Because it's so shallow. There's no real depth to it. There's no real significance. It's a habit. A religious habit. Say this. Makes me smile. You condemn order in an Episcopal service, which is ritualistic and beautiful. I don't know a more beautiful service for worship than the ritual in the Episcopal Church. It is beautiful. If you can have spirit in there, it's all that you need. It is beautiful. Don't condemn it. And go out and make one of your own. How many know we have our little crazy forms too, right in Pentecost? Nothing but forms, but we are so free. You are not free. You move continually in a pattern. And you carry it out in your service. You wouldn't know how to have a service without it, and I know it. You fall back upon the technique of that and condemn someone who worships in a beautiful place in the presence of the Lord. I can worship in any church. I can worship in a Catholic church. I can worship in the high Episcopal church. I can worship anywhere. Because my worship doesn't consist of that. I can see through the typology of it and the symbolism of it, and I can get the spirit. But people say, oh, that's form. And he says to worship in spirit. Well, now let me straighten you out on that. When he said to worship in spirit and truth, he was not condemning any kind of form. He was telling you the motivation of your heart in your worship. That's what he was talking about. How many know the Old Testament is packed with ritualism? Where did they get it? The devil? How many know God ordained it? How many know God ordained that wonderful worship? How many know he did? Or do you think the devil got in there? Oh, no. No. God ordained that. It had its function. It had its place. And God could bless it, and he used it. Has it even burned incense? How many know they burned incense? How many know it had significance? Well, when he said worship in spirit and truth, he was not talking about form, present or absent. He was talking about the motive of your heart. Let your heart in spirit worship in reality. If you need a form, If that will help you, oh, that's all right. I'm not condemning that. If that's a little crutch that can carry you, he didn't condemn that. He was telling us that the motivation of the heart in the attitude of worship and praise should be what? Let it be done in spirit and in truth. He wasn't saying a thing about form. Of course, that ate up our poor dear Quaker brethren when they broke out. How many know how they broke out? They wouldn't have a thing that looked like the Catholic Church. Anything. So they let the Catholic Church run off with a cross. How many know the cross belongs to us as much as any Catholic? Do you know that or don't? Well, some of us are dead scared to see it. You can hardly stand it to see it on your Bible. Why, it's a hangover of the prejudice that has been in people for these hundreds of years. It's a hangover of a miserable little prejudice. Please get away from all those bondages. Please. Please do it. It will wreck the real thing that God has done. It will wreck it. So the Quaker said, no, we will not have the priest to stand with a black robe and talk. We will put him in a long coat with 72 buttons down the front and a big black square hat that looks ugly. How many can see it or can't you? Do you know what that is? That is an inner resistance to a form that they didn't understand and didn't like, lest it would creep in and upset them. So they say, not a beautiful church, but one with board seats. Do you know you can worship the Lord on a cushioned seat as well as a board seat? Now, some don't. You have to have it just as crude and plain and ugly and distorted so that you feel that's more holy. No, God is the author of beauty. He is. He's the author of beauty. Well, why not include beauty in the thing? They can. Now, I come from a Quaker stock, so I know what I'm talking about. Mother's grandfather is Quaker. We come from the Long Island Quakers, from Hempstead, Long Island, where the early Quakers were. Now, I have a branch of Quaker in me. I love much of it. The quietude, the simplicity of it, I like very much. But when they go to extreme of saying you can't have a robe on when you preach, but I'll put on a black coat. I know those long Pennsylvania pen coats with about 72 buttons down the front. How do you remember it? Stiff and awkward as they could be. Then a big black hat plopped on. Does that make them any holier? Why, no. Holiness is not in externalities. Don't be caught in that. Why, people can look like that and be full of the devil. And even be proud of their humility. Yeah, they're so humble, they're proud of their humility. Well, you might as well be proud of something that's decent as to be proud of your humility. So people are. That's the way people are made. I meet them. I see them all the time. But you see, we have to have charity with all of God's children because they aren't all made alike. They aren't all made alike. So we have great charity. I'm just as happy with one another. I go to all denominations. I've spoken at the Catholic Church. Priest asked me to come to address 150 students in the Catholic Church. Well, I said, Father Collins, you know I'm top. I know all about that. He says, you have something I wish my students had. He says, you have something. You have a slant on Christianity. We had talked out and crashed out our Christian doctrine together. He says, I want my students to get a slant on this. Will you come? I said, I'll come if you pay the consequences. Well, he says, we'll take the host off of the altar and not have the presence light. And when we do that, the sanctuary is turned into a general hall for any speaking, but you can't minister to that. So out they went. The Virgin Mary was on one side and St. Joseph on the other, and I just had a lovely time. Neither one of them said a word to me. Do you know why? Well, they were made of plaster. So you see, I get in everywhere. It's good to be liberal enough to do that. Move in any, please. Now here, in this one, he says, their first way of getting rid of this thing is to send the hungry multitude away to some village. Think of the villages to which you have sent your heart your mind, your spirit. Can you think of some of them? I hope you can. Everyone is guilty. Everyone is guilty. You have tried to project that thing into another field lest it would cost you something to have it fed properly. And you would like a substitute. So you say, I'll send them over there. In my first hungering for truth, I was born and brought up in the Methodist Church, and we didn't have too much. I was saved. I got that far. And not too salubrious experience, but it was enough to, if I died, God would have taken me. I was quite certain of that. But I never had the general clara-grace of it, you know. I never had that. But I'm saved. Now, don't doubt it. How many believe I am? Will you believe it? Well, I was hungry, and I thought that if people advised me, the ministry said, well, what you need is a good training in school, college, and theology, and all that. And I thought that would satisfy. How many see me pushing into a village? Sure, that was my village. I went over there with this hunger in me, pushing this hunger into a village to find food. I didn't find it. I find it the most interesting village, but I never found my food. I exhausted it and came back from the village hungry. Well, he says, you don't need to send them to these villages. Give ye them to eat. Well, now give ye them to eat. How can this be done? Well, these people had the same little fault of counting their limitations. So listen. But Jesus said unto them, they need not depart, give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Here's that lovely thing happening. Bring them hither to me. Isn't that? This is happening. How many of you see an entire, absolute surrender and detachment from every one of those things which you have possessed, and you put them into the hands of the Lord? You put them into the hands. Bring them to me. Now stop counting. I know who you are. I know your possibilities. I know your potential. I know all of that. I knew you really before you were born. You haven't come into any kind of real consciousness with this entity. I haven't. Many Christians don't come into the realms of consciousness at all. They're saved, filled with the Spirit, and have a glorious time and go to heaven, and have never come into what I would call a real inner consciousness of the reality. They don't. And you dare to push in there, and these people who live, how many know their face gets as blank as a ghost? He says, you don't have to do that. You bring that to me. Do you dare to surrender it to me? Would you dare to surrender all that to me? Now that's all you have to count on, isn't it? Well, it's really all I have in my life. Now you dare to put that into my hands. That's all I ask. And I will be so grateful for the entire surrender of your being without any of these attachments, without any of these little experiences, without that. That we cut absolutely out. It's a stripping that few will take. He says, if you dare to do that, I can do something. I can do something. But I cannot as long as the consecration is only partial. That it has to be, just as he taught. If you want to follow Mammon, go ahead. If you want to follow me, this is the way. I mean, he's very, very explicit about this, and very drastic. I like him because of it. One thing I love about my Lord Jesus is because he was a radical. And I admire him for it. I love him. I just pull for him all the time because he was a radical. He explains the ideas of Jesus walking around with white dress on and saying sweet on him. I get very tried with him. He was a man. He was not a sentiment. He was a man. I love his manhood. I love his daring. I love his bravery. I love to see him dare to go in and explode the thing right in the midst of those old characters. I just love to see him do it. I stand back and say, goody, goody, Lord, you can do it. I can't, but I'm rooting for it. All I want. I just stand back there saying, go to it, Lord. Go to it. Give it to him. Well, why? They demanded it. How do you know they get the treatment that they demand? They itch for it, like children. Have you seen a child itch for a fraction or haven't? Why, you know, I know plenty. I know more about half the children the folks have measured. I know that, so I can tell them plenty. Now, listen, do you know why? Because a child is merely the projection of your own being. And therefore, it is impossible for you to get at a vantage point far enough away because you are still conscious of that attachment. But let a person who has got that attachment stand over here. How many know he will get a perspective that you cannot possibly get? You cannot get. That's why old bachelors and old maids know so much. I'm rooting for them now. How many get it? How many get it or don't you get it? Do you see it? Like certainly. A father and mother, they cannot help it because the child is a projection of themselves and no man has yet made it his flesh. That's true. That if you dare to have a detachment, that's why we have to get out of this centered thing. One of the signs of maturity is that you have power in God to become detached. That's one of the first things. But if there is still any clinging, you're only going to wreck the thing. It will only be partial. He says, bring them to me. Now, here's one little fish doesn't look very good. I think I can see. Bring them to me. Well, this little loaf looks kind of scorched, and I don't think we can bring them to me. Well, this loaf looks, bring them to me. Good Lord, this loaf, bring them to me. Will you please stop your arguing with God? Please stop it. He says, bring them, then bring them. He says, I knew you before you were born. I know all that. But please bring them to me. That's all they want. That's all they want. I never knew what that meant because it happened to me that I couldn't relate it. You see, I was not born in Pentecost. I never had seen it or heard it. I never had seen a person baptized in the Spirit when God baptized me. I'm so glad I hadn't. There wasn't anyone saying, now say glory, glory, glory. There's no one fussing over me, thank God. No, not at all. I had never seen anyone filled with the Spirit. Never seen anyone baptized. I had never heard a Pentecostal sermon in my life. You know, the Lord has a way of isolating you when He's after you. And before He could fill me with His Spirit, before He could fill me with this marvelous Spirit of life and light, before He put me through a most grueling, terrifying consecration. Just before He was preparing the soil. People often say, well, why doesn't this person go wise who did all being baptized? I said, listen, don't you know God has to have something to baptize when He baptizes? Don't you know He does? Yes, He has to have something to baptize. He couldn't baptize me as I had come along that way. He shut me up till about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning on the floor. I had never seen anyone get on their knees and lie down and pray. Methodists don't do that. But you know, when the Spirit moves on you, how many know it doesn't matter about the posture of your body? You could be flat on your back or on your stomach or almost anywhere when prayer goes on in. And here was this awful groaning for God. I was saved, but God wanted to do something in me before He could really fill me with His Spirit. And you know what it was? It was just this. I never related it before in my life. I had experienced it. I didn't know it had any relation to anything in here. All through that evening, until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, down on my face before the Lord, I was conscious of the Lord. I never knew he could talk to people because I never had been taught that. I didn't know about that, but I knew if there was ever anything real in my life, there was the presence of God dealing with my amorphous spirit. And when he began to deal with me, it was not concerning sins and failures and all that. That had been taken care of. I was a Christian already. He was beginning with all of the legitimate issues in living. All of the right things, all of the correct things, all of the good things, to which I might become attached in some way. Family. During that period, those 3, 4, 5 hours that I was on the floor before God, I buried every one of my relatives. I wept all my tears for them right then. My heart was broken for them right then. And I buried them. I never had any of that anguish when any of my loved ones go, because that's all gone. That's all been taken care of. That's all taken care of. My sister was the first one to go in the family. And I was way off out of town. I was in college, away from home. And he sent the telegram. I felt God so wonderful. Then they said, "Would you like to see Mabel?" I said, "Yes." And the first thing I did was to stand and sing. Wasn't that strange? I just couldn't help it. I just sang to the Lord. There was such a sense of victory and triumph. The undertaker came and took me by the shoulder, and he thought that I was demented or something, to take me out of the room. I wanted to say, "Brother, if you only knew what I know now, you wouldn't even touch me." Well, he did that. All the legitimate things. I liked schooling. I liked schooling. I was born from folks that liked schooling. My father was a teacher at the time, his grandfather. We all liked intellectual things. He said, "No, that isn't it. You were to surrender that." I surrendered that night things in scholarship that today Pentecost is all yowling to get, and I can't understand it. I can't understand it. Maybe our patterns are different, but when God dealt with me to separate me unto himself, to fill me with his Spirit, he swept all of that thing completely out of my life. Now I have that. I don't belittle it. I like my degrees as good as anyone. You've never seen me use a degree, have you? You never will. I'm a college man. You'll never see me use that. God doesn't want any of that in my life. He doesn't want it at all. Not at all. Not long ago, I came across a little box of some of my credits, my college credits, and here were all my credentials. I could have 2 degrees easily now, you see. No, because you don't need them now. I'm going to do something with you where that will never figure at all. You're coming out of that. You're coming out of that. I don't want you mixed up with it at all. And when I find our people going over into that sort of a thing, I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't understand it. Now, I'm not depreciating education. I think it's splendid if you can have it and keep it where it belongs. But if it's going to become a substitute in any way of a build-up where God is dropped out, and then I say, don't do this. I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of the results of it. It took my social life. Now you'd like to get into my romances, wouldn't you? Well, never mind, dear. I don't create those in public. I'm very human, very normal, very natural. I had my friends too. And I would like to have had a home. In natural. You see, you're not going to be in the natural, see? Now you surrender all this to me. Let it be detached. I don't want any of these things in you. I want you. And for at least an hour or more, the only thing he said to me as I lay there upon the floor, would you fall into my hand? All I want is to possess you. Will you fall into my hand? All I want is to possess you. Will you fall into my hand? All I want is to possess you. That's all he ever asked. He never asked me to preach or to teach or to sing or dance or pray. He never asked me anything. Those things have come automatically as a result of something, but it was never an issue. No. I want you. If God could actually get a hold of people in this room this morning, actually get a hold of them, without some of this religious collateral, how many know we wouldn't need to pray for a revival? It would be present. It would be present. It would be present here. It would be a beautiful spiritual revival, not one which has been mechanized. So you see, that preceded even my baptism. What was he doing? He was doing this. He was detaching me from any village experience. You need not go to any village. You bring life. Bread, fish, the potential. You bring that to me and let it get into my hand. That's all I ask of you. Will you let me possess it? That's all he ever asked. And when I surrendered and I felt this is the most real thing I've ever found, though it's wrecking my life and absolutely taking everything I've ever thought completely out. I was as empty as a barrel with both ends knocked out of it. I actually was. Well, I said, all right, now what? So the next night he filled me with the Spirit. How many see he had something to work on? He had something to work on. So since then, I've never dared, I don't want to. If you really get reality, how many know there's no temptation to go into anything else? You just don't want it. There's no temptation. You have seen reality. You have seen reality. And so with this, he said, let me take this provision. Well now, listen, get this. What did he do with it? He accepts it, he blesses it, he breaks it. That's a terrific thing. He took it and he blessed it and he broke it all to pieces. Well, who wants their life wrecked? Nobody. Self-preservation is too present. Nobody wants that. But he says, I can't feed unless it's broken. And so he breaks it all to pieces. And then on top of it, he passes it out to a multitude. Isn't that something? Now get this. When he started to feed those people, he asked for this consecration and surrender, which is absolute and eternal. And the life is put into his hand. How many of you know he uses that same bread and fish? You get it or don't you? How many of you see that he said, well, now you've given me the bread and fish. That's very pretty. Presto, here's the bread of heaven. He did no such trick as that. He used the identical bread and fish which you give. But it is no longer living under the power and impulse of this preacher. It's bread and fish which is put into the hands of God. It's a consecrated bit of bread and fish. And these crying multitudes within you, now let me help you. These urges and these desires, fundamental, right drive, clear, beautiful, and in the spirit, some of them are tremendous. The vast drive that it has. Now listen, that radiates from this bread and fish. You get me or don't you? How many know he didn't have something else to feed them? He fed them with the bread and fish. He will bring a satisfaction in your heart and life if your heart and life can be consecrated, separated, and filled with the Spirit of God. He can bring the satisfaction out of the very elements that you have. Absolutely can. Absolutely can. He did it here. He didn't introduce any other element. He used the identical element. But they were blessed of God. They had become holy. They were sacred. They were the medium that he was going to use, but they're in his hands. Our hands are off. He breaks it. I don't tell about the tragedies. That's no one's business. You don't publish your suffering. You mask them. Is that deception? No, it's Scripture. If you fast, if you are denied, if you are compelled to go without, if God calls from you, a denial, that's fasting. If your soul is exposed to fasting, I'm not talking now about fasting, going around bread and butter. If you in spirit are called upon to fast, to be denied, to go without, legitimate food, proper food, good food, not sin, good food, God-ordained food. If you are called upon to fast, let your fasting be done here. When you come out, anoint your face with oil. You get it or don't you? How many see the Mass or don't you? Do you get it? Do you get it or don't you? You don't come out and say, I'm almost killed. No, you come out and say, isn't the Lord wonderful? People say, how do you get things from God? How do you know about the Lord? Well, I said, you see, I come out, but you don't see me at home. Or when someone else, you don't see it. Oh, God. You don't hear all that going on. It comes out here. The Lord is beautiful. How many get the point, or don't you? You think I get things to peddle out to you by sitting in a little trance saying, come sweet Jesus, talk to me, 1, 2, 3, bumblebee. No, I don't do that. You have to learn to wear a mask. How many know it's a holy mask? It's a legitimate mask. But you see, he didn't introduce any other element at all. He used the very same bread and fish. He will use what you offer to him, that God can so work in your heart and life that these things that are in you will be satisfied in there by the very thing that you offer. You get it or don't? It's a strange analysis of it. How many are getting anywhere this morning? Are you? I'm proud of you. This I must write it on the blackboard. Of course, this wouldn't be teaching if I didn't. What do we call this one? I called it some provision, didn't I? Yes. How many are getting something about provision and the rest of our lives? He just rests it. Do I cry about it? Oh no, I've got something to sing about, brother. I have something to sing about which I would not exchange for all the world. For all the world. I don't want anyone's sympathy. I'm not trying to sympathy. Provision. Now, where will this be? This will be John 6 and 5. And that's where he says, what will we do to feed them? Oh, I forgot what time it is. Oh, I got it. I want to read you a poem God gave me one time when he had been cowing me. And you see, we have to be proud to get anywhere. I was brought up in the country, of course, and I walked in the furrow from plowing more than once with my bare feet. But I went barefooted so we could have shoes in winter. Don't wear them all out in the summertime, go barefooted. So we lived in the country, and I lived on a farm, and I went barefooted. And Dave was our man who helped Dad on the farm, and he used to plow, and I thought it was so wonderful to walk along behind him in that furrow. How many can smell fresh ground when it's plowed. Put up your hand. Oh, God bless you. I love every one of you. How many know we have a little secret that a lot of folks in the city don't have? Sure. That lovely fresh soil that turns to the sun. Well, now, I had walked in those furrows many times, and I had noticed the soil that he would have to plow. Now, sometimes we have in the country what we call running blackberries. How many have ever seen them running blackberries? Not the stalk kind, but the running kind. How many know the prickers on them? They are terrifying. Oh, well, I know them too. And so sometimes the plow would have to go right through a patch of that old rambling, running blackberries, and oh my, did they ever sing? And of course we were awful careful walking in them bare feet. You watch out if you've been in 2-3 times. You watch very carefully. So I knew that story too. And so when God spoke to me about you can gain any harvest in you and me, how many know you'll have to be plowed? That's hard. Well, there's all kind of plowing. How many know what a plowshare is? You know the point? The point of plowshare? Yes. How many know you have one for light plowing? And how many know you have one for garden plowing? How many know you have for the sod? I know. How many know when one strikes you, or don't you know? How many know when one of those strikes you, or don't you know? How many know people are plowed like that? They have a surface plowing, a semi-depth, and a deep plowing. And I found that out because of plowshare. So when he had plowed me, I knew because I had been in it. And so he gave me this one day. Just when I write, I don't sit down to study, but the Spirit of God releases me, and I sing. And I sing this out in just a few minutes. God's plow struck deep within my heart and plowed long furrows, one by one, through fallow ground so hard and firm, from early morn till set of sun. The plowshare was eternal truth, which tore the hidden roots in me and turned them to the light and air, till selfhood laid a field set free. I felt him walk each furrow plowed. I knew he felt the briar's sting. The field was his. It was his joy. For lo, I heard the plowman sing. He only plowed that he might sow. There must be seed to scatter wide. And then I felt his presence near. He stood in silence at my side. And so I gave him all of me, my hopes, dreams, and inner thrones. All these he scattered far and near, and left me naught to call my own. They fell like seed in furrows deep, and all were buried neath the sod. All that I had went down in death to wait the mighty breath of God. He did not leave me then alone to mourn the loss of earthly things, to be thus stripped. To be thus stripped gave greater place for life. His radiant presence brings. How could I grieve for a heart thus
cloud. I covet now no sweeter thing than wait within the harvest day. And in the meantime, here is faith. You like that? How many feel God did it? Well, God did that. That's truth. That's truth. To do what? Watch for my harvest? To have it published abroad? To be counted as this? No. No. That's all God did. That's all God did. If he buries it, he will bring forth a harvest. I covet now no sweeter thing than what? Wait the harvest day. In the meantime, hearing sing. How many know he will sing over you? He rejoiced if he said so. He sang over Jerusalem. Rejoiced over it. He does that. So with this provision, I can't go too far with it. But are you getting something? You get it? The provision. What have you offered for the provision? Now, I'm not talking about your service. He's not too interested in the things you're doing, but that's disappointing some people very much. He's not concerned with that. He's concerned with you and with me. He is not after your works. He's after you. He has 10,000 million angels who can work, but he has only one of you whom he may be able to plow and bring a little harvest unto his glory. Now, don't fret because you can't get results that other people have. Be willing to be plowed and let him gather in the harvest when he sees good. I think that's only right. Now, why isn't he too concerned with my doing? He never asked me to preach. He has never asked me to teach. He's never come and said, now this, that. He never does that. He only just comes, I want you. I want you. I'm glad it's that way. I'm temperamentally made so I couldn't take it any other way. I just couldn't. I'm glad he keeps it on that level. I just want you. That's all. That's all. Why do we serve? Why do I teach? Why do I preach? Why do I write? Why do I publish books? Why do I do that? Well, I'll tell you. It's a part of the technique which he has established by which an immortal spirit may be released, cultured, educated, trained, disciplined for him when he wants it. That's all. That's all. I will stand before his judgment someday, so will you. He will never say to me, Follette, how many souls did you win? Well, I say I never kept track of them. I suppose they're half that the thing. He'll never ask me that. He'll never say, how many churches did you build? He will never ask me, how many books did you write? Never. Never in the world. You know what he will do? He knows that already. You remember how the churches in Revelation all do that same thing? What was his first salute at every church? I know thy works. Now sit down and listen. I have somewhat to say to you. We're talking about the works. I remember that, I don't. Why? Because that's the natural, normal thing. What have you to show for your Christian experience? What have you to show for this? Let us now have a great show. No, he's not after show. He's after heart. He's after heart. He's after people. And the churches didn't know that. So he had to sit them down the very first to every church. Why? Because that's the normal, natural thing. Oh God, I have lived for you. I have won souls. I've built churches. I've written books. I've preached. Please sit down. You couldn't have done any of that acceptably only through me.
You notice in the pounds and talents and things, he never thanked any of those servants, or didn't you notice that? I did. I said, Lord, you don't even thank those people for this generous return. He says, I can't very well thank myself for the things which I have done. That settled me. No. The great I, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You're completely away from the truth. Completely so. You may be popular, but that's not the truth. He says, I know thy works. I know all about that. But I have something to say to you. You remember that? Each church, something to say. That's what he will do with me. He will not, never ask me to give a report. Most people think it's that way. They think when they come to that judgment, you'll stand there kind of nervous and scared, and the Lord will say, how many souls did you win? 102 of them actually. And he'll say to the recording angel, what are souls at? Well, so many souls, a gold crown. Well, you'll have 2 gold crowns. How many churches did you build? 3. Well, you'll have gold fence around one of them. How many see that or don't you? You get that or don't you get that? That's not scriptural at all, because he didn't do it that way. He did not do it that way. Your reward is not governed that way, nor does your reward consist of a gold house because you gave to the missionary cause. That is a lot of funny stuff that's gotten into religion, and I hate it. Because it's error. It is not truth. He never thanked one of those people for a thing that they had done. Never thanked them. What did he do? He looked at them. All he will ever do to me, he'll say, Follette, turn around. I think just the vision of him, I don't want to see him. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, look. What is he looking for? To see if any of the image of his Son is traced upon my immortal spirit. That's all he will ask for. He says we are to be conformed to the image of his Son. We'll take that up maybe next week with the methods which are used to do it. He is looking for what? A reflection of the Son of God in you and in me. How? Through the discipline of the mechanism of service. Someday your services will be blotted out. Forever! You'll never even know. You'll never think of them. Former things shall pass away. But there's something will never pass away. Whatever the likeness of the Lord Jesus is upon your immortal spirit, that will abide through the eternal ages. That all the things you ever said and done, and the glories through the word, through the work, that will be abolished. For it was purely the mechanics by which he wrought in you. You learn, he said to me, son, one of the most marvelous and glorious miracles that has ever been wrought. The transformation of you and me, and conforming us to the image of his Son, that he might pick us up someday and release us from the bondages of this flesh thing, and project us upon a plane with him. With what? Something of the image and likeness of his Son, etched upon my skin. How? Through the mechanism of the things which he has put into my pattern to do. All service is reactionary. It is not for the service in itself. It is for what he can get in you and through you and in me and through me, through the mechanics. Can you get it now or can't? The philosophy of our early church is quite lost. That was the philosophy of Paul. That was the teachings of our lovely Lord. It was the impact of truth under which our early church moved for quite a considerable time.
before these encroachments had come in upon him and diversions. You know something? It is much easier for you to do something for God than to become something for God. Now there's a sermon in a nutshell. You know it? Why? To do doesn't call necessarily from you the strange following and searching. But to become will call forth a discipline which is not necessary always for your little faith. You know you can get by with a lot. Don't I? You can get by with plenty. But he will never ask about that. He will say, what did that do to you? Not what did you do for me? He'll never say, what did you do for me? What did you do for me? He knows all of that. He will say, what did that do to you? What is the reaction in your makeup because of that? He said to that little servant, he said, let me see them. And he looked at them. He looked at them. And you know what he said? Oh, you have done wonderfully well. I never could have gotten through had it not been for you. Now, if any of you feel you're indispensable, please crawl in a barrel. Close it up. No. No, you didn't. You didn't. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. How many see the emphasis is upon the servant, or don't you get that? He doesn't say a thing about their reward. He does not. He can't. He's concerned with the servant. So he says, through all of these mechanisms, under the power of the Spirit, that the mechanics, under the Spirit, it has wrought in you something. What is it? Well done, good, faithful servant. How many see those are all abstractions and not material crowns and feathers and gold houses? Why? Because they are character attributes. I never read this in the book, children. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I read it in life. I read it in my heart. I know it. I know it. What did he do? He looked at them. And he found that here were three things he could say. Well done, you faithful servant. Come on. Well, Lord, what about my churches and all this matter? He says that was the mechanics which the Holy Spirit used. We're not dealing with that now. That's going to pass even out of your memory. Former things shall be absolutely washed out. You'll never even think of it. But this is one thing you will eternally carry with you. The testimony which I speak now to you. I said, Lord, what is that? Well, he said, well done means the work has been correctly motivated and wrought in the power of the Spirit from the Spirit. You get it? You get it? Correctly motivated and wrought in the power of the Spirit. Then God says, well done. Not much done, well done. Good. I said, he says that's from the same root as God. Meaning a God-likeness has been wrought in you. A God-likeness is being reflected in you. Something of God, like a fragrance. Have you ever been near people you felt God or haven't? Was because they were handsome, good-looking guys. I've been close to a colored person that radiated God. He says, I see that in you. A God-likeness has come into your life and being. Your character has partaken of the essence of that. And that's what I see in you now. Through the processes over there, which I use the Holy Spirit to do, it has wrought in you the miracle that I want for still another age. Well done.
How many know you can be faithful when you can't be what the world calls successful? But you can be so faithful. So he says, you have been faithful over a few things. Now, he's not dealing with the things. The things was the thing that provoked the faithfulness. How many of you get that, or can't you? How many can see the doing of the thing caused a faithfulness in them? Do you get it? Do you get that, or don't you? These servants did not have these qualifications when he put them in the field. They certainly didn't. This was all acquired, built up in them through the processes. Now he says, through that, an element I call faithfulness in you has been manifest. I will take that element called faithfulness, and I will lift it up and push it over here on another plane, and you shall be faithful over many. Do you get it or don't you? How many see it multiplied? How many get it? How many see it in gold houses and crowns or anything like that? That's all. Crowns are not souvenirs, they are one. Now it says that will be lifted up and put over there. Now perhaps another one had other elements which he is dealing with in the construction, the making of the new creature in Christ Jesus. We talk about translation and the bride of Christ and all this business, and I don't know. I don't know. It seems to me about half of it is 4,000 miles off the beam. It has anything to do with what God is doing. But it's a traditional thing that you can get blessed in. Hallelujah. You can do all that and get nowhere on earth. Nowhere on earth, let alone in heaven. No. He takes that element and multiplies it. How many see the reward was an abstract thing? You get it? How many see the reward was a character quality? Faithfulness was the reward. And I can multiply it now. Because the thing that I was after was that element. Now I can lift it up and put it over here. And he does, and the age is yet to come. So, as we go to dinner, let's try to remember, we didn't get the fourth one. Maybe I'll do that another time. That's real good too. But how do you see? Here's the multitude. What will you do with them? What are you going to do with your multitude? Have any of you learned anything this morning? I want you to. I covet you. I pray for you. I love you like spirits to me. People are not just flesh and blood. I see potential possibilities in spirits, in people. I know them. And some of them I just covet. I say, don't wreck this thing. Don't wreck it. Don't wreck it. Let God have it. But some can't do it. They'll learn to pay the price. One of the young men who went to college with me, I liked him very, very well.